What is up, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be reacting to what NASCAR was like 10 years ago. This was requested by one of my Patreon members, so I'm looking forward to getting into this video, as I obviously was not watching NASCAR in 2015. So I don't know what happened that year, what NASCAR was like 10 years ago. I don't know. So I'm hoping I'm going to get lots of information in this video. So I'm just going to shut up and we'll get straight into it.
The 2015 NASCAR season was defined by one word in particular: turmoil. One way or another, some kind of strife had basically hit everyone in the sport. Whether it was drivers, whether it was broadcast partners, fans, one way or another, it was a difficult season for many to get through and remember. But what was NASCAR like 10 years ago? What was going on in this time that led to it, and the actions that happened? Well, entering the season, 3 NASCAR superstars would catch major airwaves early on: Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, and Kyle Busch. Jeff Gordon had announced that he'd be retiring before the 2015 season began. It was the first of many high-profile retirement tours to come in NASCAR in the middle of the 2010s. And after coming off an insane return to form in 2014, it looked like Gordon could maybe end out as the guy on top. Ultimately, though, his age was catching up. He'd take a step back, and 2014 would be more of an anomaly when it came to the 2010s for him than the regular norm. Even so, he posted plenty of top 10s, but was missing top 5s and wins until late in the season at Martinsville, and then even leading at Homestead, competing for the championship. We'll talk more about that later. Tony Stewart was coming off his worst season ever, both personally and professionally. It involved an incident that caused the death of driver Kevin Ward in 2014. He performed awful on track. The performance in 2015 wouldn't get any better. It would be the worst season on record for Stewart, not even scoring a top 5 on the season, and after coming back from injury, it was clear he was a shell of his former self. As for somebody else with injury, was Kyle Busch, and we'll talk about him a bit later, because he deserves a bit of a spotlight later. But there were other storylines too entering the season. For instance, Dale Earnhardt Jr. had been quoted as saying that he had not given much of thought to retirement because he was, quote, having too much fun. And entering the season, he'd have new crew chief Greg Ives coming off an Xfinity title with then young phenom Chase Elliott at JR Motorsports.
Oh God, he looks so young there.
Steve Letarte had left for NBC, part of NASCAR's brand new 2015 to 2024 TV deal that was worth $8.2 billion. Basically half the season to Fox, the other to NBC. Letarte would be the crew chief analyst for them and would be with them through the remainder of their deal. And there was also a major driver change. Carl Edwards had moved from Roush Fenway's number 99 Ford to the newly formed 4th JGR team in the number 19 Toyota, forming a super team of Edwards, Kenseth, Hamlin, and again, the guy we'll talk about later, Kyle Busch. There were rule changes, too, that made this season pretty unique. There was a new, for instance, officiating camera system. It had been put into a beta test in the 2014 chase, and it reduced the amount of officials in the pits from 24 to 10 in 2015. Okay. It also led to NASCAR not penalizing anymore for loose lug nuts, as there wouldn't be as many officials to enforce it. This would also be the first season in years where testing was banned, and Daytona preseason thunder would not take place, much to the chagrin of many fans.
Why?
Testing wasn't the only reduction, though. Tapered spacers were added to the engines, going from 850 to 725 horsepower, while 2 inches were cut out of the rear spoilers. Unlike 2014, NASCAR was not going for a more high-drag, high-horsepower package and was trying to do different things to make the racing a bit more spiced up, as at the time, fans had complained about 2014 being a bit too boring and more spread out outside of the restarts. And it made a large difference year over year in the racing, though not to the effect NASCAR and the fans wanted. Also, the shortened and or changing of all qualifying sessions, group qualifying especially, was prevalent. And in 2015's Daytona 500 qualifying, it was a disaster, much to, again, the upset nature of Clint Bowyer. The season itself kicked off with the Daytona 500, though. While dominated by Hendrick Motorsports, it was won by Joey Logano. kicking off Logano's best season to date, where he'd become a truly elite driver. HMS was a mixed bag. We talked about it earlier, while Gordon was consistently in the top 10, he was not necessarily an elite driver. That honor would go to his teammates of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Jimmy Johnson, who excelled in this season and with this car. Wow. Jr. getting back to his mid-2000s super speedway dominance, winning at Daytona and also having his 6th Talladega win. Jimmy Johnson, well, he won at a ton of mile-and-a-half tracks. And through the season, the most 1, 2, 3 finishes would come from Jimmy Jr. and Kevin Harvick at these mile-and-a-halves. Harvick was the defending Cup champion. Even better, though, was his performance than 2014, as now, with Rodney Childers as crew chief, the team had taken another step up. And it looked like he was going to be the title favorite. He was one of a large movement of drivers who had their big, large-scale moves paid off with performance, like Carl Edwards, who we talked about earlier. While he hadn't won much of the year, he did break through and get a win in the throwback race, the return to the Southern 500 on traditional date at Darlington. He won in one of the only non-throwbacks that night, ironically. And Gibbs was on it in 2015. Matt Kenseth was another title contender. Entering the chase, he was the hottest driver in the sport, winning 3 of the 6 races entering the 10-race
3 of
stint.
the 6.
Kyle
Wow.
Busch. We'll talk about Rowdy now. At the start of the season, Busch would be caught up in an accident and break his leg in a gnarly wreck at Daytona in the Xfinity race. He'd miss roughly half of the regular season and have a mad dash to the top 30 in points after he got a win.
Break his leg, that's fair.
At the time, you could qualify in with a win and just being in the top 30, and in Busch's case, getting a waiver. The chase itself, well, that started with some shock. Mainly from Jimmy Johnson, who was the biggest driver to miss out on going through the chase due to just being ended by a parts failure at Dover. But most of the contenders would skirt through. It was a round that was after this that would really make the big shock waves. Kansas. Logano and Matt Kenseth are going head-to-head trying to win the race. Kenseth on the defense, Logano on the offense. And with it, Logano would send Kenseth after one too many blocks into the corner. Logano going on to win the race, while Kenseth, well, he wouldn't get much. And with the Charlotte race having Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Matt Kenseth both have problems, it meant that Kenseth and Little E would be in a must-win scenario heading into Talladega. And it looked like Jr. might actually be able to pull it off. After having issues all race entering the pits, as well as coming back from being a lap down, the 88 was charging right behind the 22. Ultimately, though, with the blown engine of Jamie McMurray, it would be a late restart that would decide the race. After a false restart that never even reached the line, they did try one, but there was a crash behind them. Kevin Harvick was low on power, and because of that, he started a wreck in the middle of the field, allegedly, and he got through to the next round. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. didn't, and neither did Matt Kenseth, who was collected in it, while Joey Logano won 3 races in a row.
Wow.
The lone restart rule was something that had changed during the season for super speedways, thanks to the late crash that Austin Dillon had in the middle of the summer at Daytona, flipping into the fence in one of the scariest
camera angle was crazy.
Seen since the death of Dale Earnhardt. But with it, the season had 4 races remaining and nothing could be changed. At the third round, Martinsville is probably the race everybody remembers from this year. It was dominated by Joey Logano, who looked well on his way to a 4th win in a row. But after Penske had had some restart shenanigans and Matt Kenseth got knocked out of contention, after already being knocked out of the chase, he was done. He had been wronged in his eyes at Kansas, at Talladega, and now this was strike 3, causing one of the most famous clips of the 2010s. Because of this, Jeff Gordon would sneak through, and with it, get his final win of his career, leading to his qualification to the Final Four and competing for a championship in what would supposedly be his last start. At Texas, Brad Keselowski led all day, looked well on his way to winning as well, before Jimmy Johnson at the end got by him. And in this race, Joey Logano had issues, so now he was the one who was in the must-win scenario entering Phoenix, which was a straightforward race, dominated for the most part by Stewart-Haas Racing, Kevin Harvick and Kurt Busch having the 2 best cars, with the Penske duo up there as well. But when there was rain in the middle of a pit cycle, Dale Earnhardt Jr. would cycle out as the leader. After an abnormally long yellow, the race was called, and Junior, unknown to many of us out there, would get his final win.
Aww.
And so the final four was the aforementioned Jeff Gordon, looking for glory in his last race.
Wish
the
I could have
dominant
seen
Kevin Harvick, looking to be the first
Junior
back-to-back
race
champion since Jimmy Johnson went for 5 straight in the end of the 2000s. The underdog Martin Truex Jr., who broke through with Furniture Row Racing at Pocono, getting a win and bringing the little team that could all the way up to a championship berth. And then Kyle Busch, trying to complete the ultimate comeback, which of course he did, beating all of these drivers and winning his first and very controversial championship in the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series. So, with that, what do you remember most from 2015?
Nothing.
Controversy
I wasn't
or the great
watching.
moments or something in between that's personal to you?
Sounds like a good
Let me know down in the comments below.
season to
All
watch,
right, what
though.
you liking this video?
It sounded like quite a bit went on during the 2015 season. Then I'm getting FOMO from it. I wasn't watching that, obviously, like 10 years ago. So that's crazy to see that so many things happened. But yeah, I really enjoyed that video. So thank you to my Patreon members for requesting this video. And with that being said, if you have any other videos that you'd like me to react to, drop them in the comments and work my way through everybody's suggestions at the moment. If you did want to check out any of my other socials or become a Patreon member and get early access to videos like this or top priority of your suggestions, then you can do all of that down below. But I hope you enjoyed today's reaction and I will catch you next time for the next one. Bye!